All right, guys, welcome in to the show. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. Mike Tomlin had his season-ending press conference today. And in terms of total takeaways, I don't think that there were many, frankly. Um, I think it was Brooke Pryor. I might be incorrect. Who asked him about teams potentially reaching out and inquiring about trading for Mike Tomlin, to which he told those teams to save their time. So if there was any sort of like sliver of a doubt that he was gonna be back, I think all of that has been squashed. Which I think most of us kind of expected, no matter our personal feelings on it. I don't think many people expected them to move on from Tomlin, and this was kind of you know the nail in the coffin for any of that ever happening. But one thing that did stick out to me was it does feel very apparent that Justin Fields is going to be the quarterback for Pittsburgh in 2025 for multiple reasons. Tomlin was asked about what steps Justin Fields would need to take forward to be a starter, be looked at as a starter. And Mike Tomlin says that he feels Fields already took those steps in the 6 games that he started for the Steelers this past year. And Tomlin was also very heavily emphasized that mobility was important when looking at the quarterback position. And when asked if Fields had earned, or I'm paraphrasing here, but if Fields had shown enough to earn a pole position, we heard that phrase a ton this past offseason, but if Fields had done enough to earn a pole position title, should he be back in Pittsburgh this coming offseason? And Tomlin said, certainly. So all that put together, combined with the fact that he's much younger than Russell Wilson, I think that kind of paints a picture that the Steelers are going to try to bring Fields back. Fields himself also said that he would like to be in Pittsburgh next year. He likes it there, but he also doesn't want to have to go to another team, learn a whole new playbook. I think that he feels pretty comfortable in Pittsburgh, and things were working in the first 6 weeks that he started. So at this point, if I had to guess, I would heavily expect Justin Fields to be back with the Steelers. Now, the team did sign quarterback Skylar Thompson today as well. Considering that they didn't have any quarterbacks under contract, I would expect Skylar Thompson to basically fill that Kyle Allen role of being the third quarterback. So that would be my guess on it. That's the role that he filled for the Dolphins this past year. Mike White was the primary backup for Miami. Skylar Thompson was the third quarterback. Thompson did start a playoff game in the 2022 season for the Dolphins when Tua got hurt. They played against Buffalo. They didn't win. And he went like 18 of 40. I'd have to go look up the actual stats, but I'm pretty sure it was in the ballpark of that. So if I had to guess, he's at best going to be the backup. My best guess would be is that he's going to be the number 3 quarterback. If I could pick who the number 2 would be, I would say the Steelers should trade a day 3 pick for Joe Milton, because he had a hell of a game against Buffalo to close out the season where his arm looked incredibly powerful. He is incredibly mobile. I think that if something were to happen to Fields, Milton could come in and play serviceable. And it would make sense to have him in an Arthur Smith system where he's mobile. He's got a huge arm. Similar attributes that Fields has. And it would make sense to have him in the offense. And the thing with Fields, too, is that it gives him the opportunity. It's a prove it year. All right, hey, show us that you're the guy. And if he's not the guy, then okay, you can try to trade up and draft somebody in 2026, because odds are, even if Fields isn't the guy, they're still going to scrape together 9 or 10 wins. So you'll have to do something similar to what Kansas City did, something similar to what Buffalo did when they traded up for Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, respectively. Because odds are the Steelers are not going to be, a top 10 to 12 draft pick team. They never are. And while some might argue that having a draft pick like that, myself included, would be the easiest way to get a quarterback, the second easiest way would be, all right, draft up into the top 10, or sorry, trade up into the top 10 and try to draft a guy. Because I know that Tomlin pointed out that, Lamar wasn't taken in the top half of the draft and Jalen Hurts wasn't a first round pick. Those examples are not the rule to finding a quarterback. They are the exceptions. They are not the norm. And as Daniel Valente pointed out on Twitter, you are much more likely to find a Kenny Pickett taking a quarterback later than you are to find a Lamar or a Jalen Hurts or a Dak Prescott for that matter. The highest hit rate in terms of finding a franchise quarterback is you take him in the top 10 to 12 of the draft. Patrick Mahomes was drafted 10th overall. Josh Allen was drafted 7th overall. Joe Burrow, number 1 overall. CJ Stroud and Jaden Daniels, number 2 overall. There's a much higher hit rate there than taking a flyer on a guy and hoping that it works out. Not to say that it can't, but if that's how you're going about finding a quarterback, that's the wrong way to do it, frankly speaking. If you're going to go so far against the grain of what works to find the most important position in sports, then that's a bad way of doing business. And I understood the moves that they made this past offseason. They made sense. They won 10 games a year ago with horrible quarterback play. They figured, okay, if we can just get, around league average quarterback play, we can win more games and maybe win a playoff game or two. And I completely defended that. And I'm not going to go back on that just because of the results. At the time, it made perfect sense. But the passing game stalled out. In my opinion, yes, some of it was on Russ, but also just the lack of pass catchers there. So I'm not going to, go back on me saying, yeah, it makes sense to bring in Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. They're better than what you had. That makes sense. I'm not going to let the results dictate my original thoughts on that. So, but like I said, with the way that Tomlin was talking about the quarterback position and talking about Fields in his end of season presser, it does feel like Fields is going to be the guy that gets brought back, which makes sense. If you had to choose between Russ and Justin Fields makes more sense. You just saw what the ceiling is with Russell Wilson. A couple good games against the Jets, against the Bengals, the Commanders. And by the way, this isn't anything against Russell Wilson. Like I said on the previous show, I think that he was a very fun jolt of energy and had the Steelers winning games. It just didn't end well. I don't harbor any ill will toward Russ. But I think that we just saw the absolute height of what he can do. Even if they can win a playoff game, you're not winning a Super Bowl with Russell Wilson. There's no reason to bring him back. Like I said, all due respect to him. But Fields played well in the first 6 games that he started, put them in position to win all of those games. Like that Colts game especially really sticks out to me. They were down multiple scores in the second half. And he didn't have a great game in terms of moving the ball downfield, had a bad fumble. He made young guy mistakes. But he also made a hell of a throw to George Pickens down the sideline, ran for a couple touchdowns, put them in position to come back and win the game. And on the final drive, they had a shot to win the game. And then clock management stuff went bad and, just didn't go their way. But he played well enough to get them in position to come all the way back. Same thing against Dallas, where wasn't a perfect game from him, but was able to make enough plays, put them ahead at the end. And if the defense just holds the Cowboys, they win the game. But instead, Dallas drives down 15 plays, takes a bunch of time off the clock, and wins at the end. So, Fields, this isn't me saying he's a top 10 quarterback by any means, but top 20, absolutely. Even if he's, near the 20-ish range, maybe he improves and continues to improve. But you aren't going to find anything better than him on the open market. I think that Sam Darnold is fool's gold. I think that he's kind of proven that. And I would rather you just stick with a guy who is in the system and is right around that same tier of quarterback than roll the dice on a Sam Darnold and have it blow up in your face. Especially because Sam Darnold's going to have a market. Like, I hope Sam Darnold succeeds. I think he's going to get, the Baker Mayfield type deal where it's 3 for $100 million or 3 for 95, somewhere in that range. Go to a team where if they have the weapons and the right play caller, he can continue to be successful. I just don't think that Pittsburgh would be the right place for Sam Darnold. I think that Justin Fields makes more sense. Again, he's been in the system for a year. He can come back and continue building upon what he did in the first 6 games last year. And I think going into the offseason, knowing that he's the guy, that helps the team overall. We all kind of figured, okay, Russell Wilson's going to be the starter going into week 1, and then he gets hurt. And then they kind of play quarterback, okay, is he going to start? Is it going to be Fields again? They do that for a month and a half. But going into week 1, knowing, okay, Justin Fields is our quarterback, a guy who we played with last year, a guy who we like, a guy who we trust, that I think would make the utmost sense for Pittsburgh in terms of what they do at the quarterback position. And again, it's you roll the ball out and say, okay, prove to us that you're the guy. Show us that we should keep you as our long-term quarterback. And if he does, then that's great. You traded what ended up being a 6th-round pick for now the guy that you believe can be your franchise quarterback. That's great. And if he doesn't, then okay. You draft somebody in 2026 and you try it that way. And in terms of who's going to be there in 2026, I mean, that's a whole other conversation that we'll have in a year. But it does make the utmost sense to have Justin Fields be the guy. Rather than Russell Wilson, who, again, he's going to be 36, 37 years old. He's not the future of the position. We just saw the ceiling of what he can do. And, I'll look back on, the peak Russ stuff very fondly. His first game against the Jets, very fun. The Giants game, Commanders, Bengals, all of those games that he put together when they were winning, a very fun time. But it inevitably came back down to earth, and that was the peak of it. So there's no reason to bring him back. I wish him well in what he does. I honestly think that maybe this might be the time for him to hang it up. I don't think it's going to get better than this. I think that he proved enough to people where it's like, yeah, I still had it. I was still able to help lead a team to the playoffs. He had a respectable year, 18 touchdowns, 5 picks in total. That's a respectable year for a guy who started 12 games, who everybody kind of wrote off. So I think that this is a fine year for Russell Wilson to be like, okay, I proved what I got to prove. I've got a Super Bowl. I'm more than likely going to the Hall of Fame. I could probably just call it here. We'll see if he does, but I think that this will be a fine time for him to just hang it up. And in terms of Fields, I think it would make perfect sense for Pittsburgh to bring him back for all the reasons I've already pointed out. And if it works out, then that's awesome. You got a guy who you can potentially, build with going forward. And if it doesn't, then you draft a guy in 2026. Even if that means you got to trade up to do it. Because like I said, no matter what happens, they're going to finish with 9 wins and be drafting somewhere between 17 and 22. And odds are a quarterback that is going to be a franchise answer isn't going to fall. So you got to get aggressive. You got to move up and get the guy. Which is hopefully something that they'll realize when the time comes. If the time comes and they make the move. But for right now, it does look like Justin Fields is going to be the starting quarterback for the Steelers in 2025. And as I said in the show yesterday about the quarterback options, that's something I'm perfectly fine with. Roll with him, see what he can do with an entire offseason, knowing he's the guy, a full season as the starter, another year in the system, and see what he can do to prove or not prove that he's the guy. But one way or the other, you'll have some sort of answer going into 2026. So thank you guys for watching. If you're not already subscribed to the channel and you love all the Steelers talk, be sure to subscribe as well for all the national NFL stuff. You can get every episode of the Pump Fake here on the channel as well wherever you get your podcasts. So subscribe to the channel, like the video, do all that YouTube stuff. Be back with more Steelers content, more NFL content, all throughout the offseason, all throughout the rest of the playoffs. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'll see you soon.